The Tata Steel Masters 2023 has begun. It's the morning after the night before. Sorry, I'm a little bit late with my report. I was rather busy in West London last night. Come on, you bees. Right, let's concentrate on the tournament. Well, the organisers have done a brilliant job in assembling a superb lineup of players. Starting with Magnus Carlsen. But he faces really stiff competition. All the usual rivals like Caruana, Ding, Aronian. But we have the young generation as well. 3 players from India. We have Aragaisi, Gukesh, Pragnananda, and we have Vincent Keimer from Germany. And Nodirbek Abdusattorov from Uzbekistan, 18 years old. I want to look at his game against Richard Rapport. So, Rapport playing white. Richard, I mean, he's only 26, so he's part of, you could say, the younger generation, but not the teenage generation. And Richie likes to go his own way in the opening, playing often quite old lines, and this is a good example. So we have a Vienna, and not with bishop c4, but this Vienna gambit. I mean, this is ancient theory, and black strikes with d5. F takes e5, knight takes e4, and here the standard move, or the most popular move, is to play knight f3, but Richie, he likes to, play just something a little bit left field. So queen f3. And it's interesting, in the interview after the game, Abdusattorov, he played f5, and Abdusattorov said, yeah, not popular, but a fresh idea, when he was describing f5. Yeah, in fact, you don't have to play f5, you can play knight c6, for example. But this is hardly a fresh idea. A quick scan of the database will tell you that this position has been played, going way back into the 19th century by players like Mason, Blackburn, Teichmann, Pillsbury, Lasker, Alyakin, Spielmann. I mean, this is actually ancient theory. There's a kind of modern twist on it as well. More on that in a second. So f5, I mean, it looks very well motivated to me because this beautiful knight is supported by these 2 pawns. And if this is exchanged off, then, I mean, black has nice control in the centre, and this queen looks like a liability, so that must be good. So instead of, after f5, instead of exchanging, then d3, white gets rid of that knight, and if white can play the pawn to d4 and the bishop to d3, then that's pretty healthy. That would be a very nice pawn chain. Therefore, black plays d4. That's an important move, and it leaves this pawn on e5 rather stranded. You can see it's cut off from these pawns. And this is the major theme in this game, actually. Is this pawn on e5 going to be an asset or a liability? Is it going to carve out space for white? It's open this diagonal. Or is it going to turn into a weakness? You can see if that d pawn is taken, then the queen takes, and the pawn is lost straight away. So white develops. Bishop e2, but it's a very curious setup. One would really like that bishop on f3 and the queen on e2. If only these pieces could actually switch around. Knight c6, that's good. Time to bring out a piece. And queen g3. Okay, that's better. The queen certainly finds a nice spot on g3. Supporting the pawn, but also looking down at g7. And if d takes c3, bishop h5 check. It's incredible that with just 2 pieces, well, okay, 3, white can actually build a winning attack. Just have a look at this. Take here, you can take this, and this is actually winning for white. And let me just go a bit further. Okay, I'll go a little bit further. I mean, this is really something out of the 19th century, and that wins the queen. Therefore, taking on c3, not a good idea. So bishop e6. And we're still following some very old games. So the Austrian player Rudolf Spielmann played bishop f3 in this position, for example. He played that a few times. That was a speciality of his, going back into the, I'm looking at his games from 1911, 1912. But Rapport plays c4 here. And this, I mean, I don't know whether Rapport knew this. I suspect he did. But this is a speciality of German international master Georg Seul, an old teammate of mine from the German Bundesliga. And Georg has played this on quite a few occasions. It's a very interesting idea that white takes the d5 square away from black's pieces. So it means this bishop is going to come to f3 and it can't really be challenged on that diagonal. There is a slight drawback in that after bishop b4 check, then the king is a little disturbed. But Georg appreciated that actually you can put the king on d1 and it's actually relatively safe behind these pawns. But very original to actually, leave the king in the middle like this. So this is what happened. And now queen d7. So Abdusattorov wants to castle queenside. Rook b1. Is the king completely secure on the queen side? Well, it's kind of interesting with this rook here. And white can get away with this because, I mean, normally if you have your king in the middle, then that splits the rooks. They're hard to connect. But actually this rook on b1 is usefully employed, you could say, on the semi-open file. And this rook on the king's side will be able to come into play here. But it's a very curious position. Typical Rapport, likes these unorthodox positions. But Abdusattorov playing in a more traditional way, you could say, with the rooks connected here. Bishop e7. I mean, of course, there's a threat to take here and take on b4. So the bishop has to move somewhere. Bishop e7. And I have to say that this looks quite attractive for white. The only problem is it's hard for the queen and the rest of white's pieces to connect with the pressure on the queen side. White has to take care of this pawn advance. If black can get this majority going, then that could be very dangerous. And that's why I think a safe move for white here is h4, to just try and take good control over the g5 square. But Rapport, I think understandably, he wants to develop rapidly. If we can just play with our pieces instead of pawns, then that's desirable. And yeah, he's not hanging around. He just wants to bring this knight into the game very quickly. b6 from Abdusattorov, which first glance looks a bit odd because it weakens these squares, but actually it means that this knight is now free to roam. And this is dangerous. So I can imagine, for example, after rook e1, supporting that pawn, Rapport might have been concerned about knight b4, and there's potential to move the queen in, attacking here as well, and also potential to sacrifice on c4 and play d3. This is highly dangerous. So Rapport didn't hang around. Knight f4, which puts pressure on the blockader. However, it's met by an excellent move. g5, so these pawns get going. And if, well, Rapport took on e6. And of course, it's important to realise that bishop takes can be met by rook g8, and the pin will win a piece. So here is where things turn, because these pawns can always hassle these pieces. The queen is a good blockader for once, and this pawn is, yeah, it looks like it's lacking protection basically. Rook b5 played, protecting that pawn. And this is an excellent move. Knight b8. So black just wants to play the pawn to c6 to drive the rook away, and also that knight can come back to d7. So Rapport decides he may as well exchange off that rook. But white's position is losing its dynamism. Abdusattorov has sort of managed to quell white's activity, and white is just left with these pieces, and it's very hard to get past these wonderful pawns on f5 and g5. Knight d7, so black is building up pressure here, and if rook e1, then knight c5, and that knight could hop into c3. So in fact those holes around the king looking a bit unpleasant now. So queen d2 from Rapport. Excuse me, queen h2. I'm losing the plot here. h6. So that's just securing this pawn before he takes here. Remember, there's potentially a pawn hanging here as well. g4. So Rapport is desperately trying to find squares for his pieces. So after f4, I mean, he realizes he's losing this pawn, but at least this bishop will be able to come in on the light squares. And who knows, once the pawn drops, perhaps a little bit of pressure on the e-file. Abdusattorov decided, okay, I'm just going to take the e-pawn straight away. And now a little tactical sequence. Takes on f5, takes on f3. So an exchange into an endgame. Pawns are still level. However, with this rook claiming the open file, then black is better. And this pawn is securely blockaded. And actually it's really cut off from the rest of white's pieces. Of course, it can be supported by the rook, but not by the king and the bishop. So this one, yeah, really isn't too long for this world. Bishop b2. And Abdusattorov said he'd overlooked this because, well, it feels as though white is actually really lacking any kind of play here. Whereas black's moves are easy. You know, you bring the king over, move the bishop. This pawn is dropping, the rook is active. But bishop b2 is a good move. And the idea is this, just to bring the bishop on b2 into play. So that increases white's activity. And it's good to exchange pawns as well. White is still worse because black is active and the pawn on e6 is probably doomed. But it's getting closer now. So the bishop moves in order to bring the king to e7. But, you know, in rook and pawn endgames, the winning margin has to be quite broad. Have I got that the wrong way round? It very often rook and pawn endgames can lead to a draw. That's what I'm trying to say. And here, although black is a pawn up, this d pawn obviously gives white counterplay. The drawing margin is quite wide. I think that's what I meant to say. Good grief, I'm losing the plot. So yeah, you can see that the king is cut off from the d-file. And obviously that gives white great counterplay, so black has to be a bit careful when he's chasing around with this rook. Threat to take here. And, you know, if Rapport plays king b3 and then brings the king up, I mean, it feels like white has enough counterplay to draw this position. You know, at the moment, there isn't yet a passed pawn for black, and that makes a big difference. But rook e6 played, also a tempting move to take this pawn. And white's rook is active. And now Rapport plays the king to c4. d6 is the computer recommendation. Let's just have a quick look at this, how this might develop. And this is a very typical scenario, that white gives up the d-pawn for the g-pawn, and we arrive at a position where black has these two passed pawns on the queen side against this pawn, and the computer believes this to be a draw. We can get some kind of situation like this, for example, rook g5 with the idea h5. And if that's taken, then rook g6 is going to pick up one of those pawns. So, yeah, this is a common transposition to this endgame, and it seems as though white is able to draw this position. The king is too far away. If the king could protect those pawns and this rook could deal with the h-pawn, then good winning chances, but not in this case. But king c4 played, rook c1, and king b3 is still okay. Rapport played king d4, which seems logical to protect this pawn, but actually now things are getting critical because Abdusattorov is able to advance the b-pawn. Apparently Rapport was running short of time and he'd obviously just miscalculated something. If white takes that pawn, then this is actually extremely difficult, probably lost for white, because black threatens to play a check and bring the rook to h4. Once that pawn is lost, the g-pawn supported by the king is very strong. You can see that this king is just way offside. That's the problem here. So b4 just played, but this was losing immediately. b3. I suspect that Rapport had overlooked that black's king could become active here. If rook b8 going behind the pawn, then king e4. And if d6, rook check, the king is very unfortunately placed and this wins for black. In the game we had rook f8 check, and this king steamed in. This is very nice, supporting the b-pawn, and now king c2. And white resigned. If the pawn queens, then this can be taken, and then black makes a queen. And there is no defense. If rook b8, well, you can make a queen, or yeah, simplest is just to play rook takes pawn. Well, I thought it was a fascinating game. Just going right back to the opening, you know, we arrived at such an unclear, unorthodox position very early on in the game. You know, always interesting to see Richard Rapport and the way he plays, but very well negotiated by the 18-year-old Uzbek, Nodirbek Abdusattorov. In the other games, there was only one other decisive game. Ding Liren defeated Gukesh really convincingly, actually. That was a very nice game. Carlsen against Jurriaan. Let me just show you the finish to that. It looked like Carlsen was squeezing and he'd engineered a situation where he was seen to be breaking through to black's king. Rook d8 and queen check the threat. But Jurriaan held with this move. Rook takes e2. He'd obviously calculated this well in advance. And in fact, if this is taken, then the game swings in black's favour with a check here. And black is first. After rook e2, rook d8, still very dangerous. Bishop e4. That just gives the king an escape square. This was exchanged. Queen takes still looks terrifying. But actually, the queen protects h5, and now this is some kind of a threat. So Carlsen actually just had to give perpetual check in this position. It was a tense game, but actually Aronian had it under control. So a draw there. So going into round 2, or after round 1, we could say there are 2 leaders. We have Nodirbek, Abdusattorov and Ding Liren. Join me for the next round, round 2. I'll try and be a little bit more prompt with my reports, but it's already looking like an absolutely fascinating tournament. Thanks for watching.